Okay, Peter, well, we'll have to get back to you. I'm just going to interrupt. The Human Rights Council, they're holding a regular session in Geneva, and Russian Foreign Minister is about to give a speech. Well, now, let's hear from him right now, live.
Sustainable development should rest upon the processes of democratization and the comprehensive modernization of society. Mass protests across the Middle East and North African countries have exposed a range of problems that have accumulated over decades: poverty, unemployment, the lack of social and economic rights in general. These problems should be addressed by the peoples of the affected countries themselves without coercion or external interference, peacefully and within legal frameworks through national dialogue and public consensus on the ways for long overdue transformations. The use of military force against civilians is unacceptable, as occurred in Libya, causing hundreds of civilian deaths. Russia condemns such violence, demands its immediate cessation and observance of international humanitarian law. We have clearly expressed our attitude towards those events in the statements by the President of the Russian Federation and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as in the joint Russian-EU statement of the 24th of February and 2 days ago in the United Nations Security Council. We also welcome the principled stand taken by the Human Rights Council. The tasks of democratization and modernization face not only individual countries, but the entire system of international relations as well. The realities of an emerging, new, fairer, polycentric world require the development of multilateral institutions which should promote equitable cooperation and a joint search for solutions to emerging problems. These solutions should strengthen the global rule of law, ensure democratic procedures both in domestic and international affairs, and contribute to the general observance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as of other universal instruments, as well as revealing the creative potential of civil society and help increase its responsibility. The United Nations Human Rights Council was established precisely as one of these institutions. While formulating the goals for the Council 5 years ago, we believed that human rights were a cornerstone of the current world order and United Nations activities along with security and development. Resolution 60/251 of the United Nations General Assembly establishing the Council declared principles such as equitable dialogue, the elimination of double standards, and the improper use of human rights arguments to advance narrow political interests, equal attention to all human rights categories, broadening understanding among civilizations, cultures, and religions on the basis of common human rights values, and with due account for national and regional particularities. The procedure of such an effective and equitable monitoring mechanism as the Universal Periodic Review, which has already proven its relevance, had been agreed upon. The Russian Federation has undergone this procedure and is taking steps to incorporate the recommendations we've received into its ongoing national efforts to protect human rights and develop civil society. We expect all other countries to also take on recommendations by the Human Rights Council in the most serious manner. We also must look more closely at the rights of national minorities, in particular in the context of the chronic problem of statelessness. We need to ensure full implementation of the corresponding resolutions of the OSCE, EU, and the CERD. We believe that we could also have a contribution made by the Human Rights Council, which has shown its viability and its ability to take effective decisions. The adoption of the Code of Conduct has strengthened the framework for the functioning of special procedures, special rapporteurs, special representatives, experts, and working groups. The nature of its working style has also changed, characterized now by broad-based dialogue, the involvement of countries concerned, and a search for consensus. We consider it extremely important to continue improving the working methods of the the Council and to avoid politicization of its topics as an instrument of political pressure. Attempts to divide states into bad, good, pupils, tutors, and to dilute the interstate nature of the Council are counterproductive and can only harm multilateral cooperation. These issues require increased attention in the context of the ongoing HRC review. We see our main task as being to preserve the constructive potential and positive atmosphere which had been so difficult to achieve. The Council should not shy away from difficult issues, but some of them should be approached on a stage-by-stage basis without mounted attacks or cavalry charges, so as to avoid a negative impact on the process of building mutual confidence. If everybody is interested in achieving specific results in the form of real improvements in the human rights situation, that is indeed the approach we should take. If, however, some are interested mainly in broader mass media coverage, that has to do with public relations rather than cooperation. Mr. President, last year we celebrated the 65th anniversaries of two key events in the recent history of mankind: the great victory in World War II and the establishment of the Nuremberg International Tribunal for the prosecution of major Nazi criminals. The tragedy of that war convinced world leaders of the need to establish the United Nations. The United Nations became the cornerstone of modern international law, a fundamental code of conduct for states and multilateral organizations, and laid down a foundation for the current system of promoting and protecting human rights. The provisions of the Nuremberg Tribunal Charter were also supported by the United Nations General Assembly in its decisions as universally recognized principles of international law, which provided a basis for the further development of standards on the norms of war crimes, crimes against humanity, including genocide, and for defining constituent elements of the crime of aggression. Our common duty is to carefully protect this international legal foundation for current relations between states in its entirety. This has been worked out by peoples as the main lesson of World War II. Political speculation and attempts to distort its genesis, nature, and consequences, to equate victims with butchers, liberators with aggressors, and to challenge the outcomes of the Nuremberg Tribunal are inadmissible. Such attempts are nothing but a mockery of the memory of millions of people from all countries who fell in the fight against Nazism, and they create a breeding ground for new ideologies of hatred. Russia's initiative, the United Nations General Assembly annually adopts a resolution calling for the suppression of such attempts. Regrettably, some countries, including members of the anti-Hitler coalition, feel shy to support it, alluding to freedom of expression. We regard this position as highly dangerous. Everyone must recall what such shyness led to in the 1930s. We are convinced that today one of the main tasks of the international community is to prevent and suppress ethnic and religious extremism and manifestations of racism and racial discrimination, as well as overcoming xenophobia and intolerance. The Durban Declaration and documents of the 2009 Review Conference, in the adoption of which Russia played a leading role, could serve as a major impetus for this task. I would in particular like to stress the need for an interfaith agreement. World religious leaders should stand together against extremism and protect people suffering in conflict areas when the right to life, which is the main human right, is under threat. The situation in many regions of the world, including the Balkans, Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, all urgently demand a more comprehensive and nuanced approach to accommodate the religious factor. And in issues such as the fate of Jerusalem, that factor is indeed a decisive one. Russia has consistently put forward proposals for establishing interreligious dialogue within the framework of the United Nations, the Council of Europe, and UNESCO, and here we expect support from our partners. In order to ensure that human rights become an integral part of our life, we have to look at the various measures taken to ensure eternal values of moral world religions, various cultures and customs. We're referring to eternal concepts such as human dignity, responsibility, justice, freedom, work, and family. These moral categories have been developed over millennia, and they are the pillars of the various societies and should consolidate nations, peoples, and ethnic groups. The objective nexus between human rights and traditional values of mankind should contribute to strengthening the further universalization of the concept of human rights. Russia initiated a discussion on this topic in the United Nations system. This is a discussion to which many states responded with interest. At the present session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, we, together with the co-sponsors, will table a draft resolution on this subject. We look forward to its adoption by consensus. We are interested in expanding dialogue on human rights issues, active cooperation with the appropriate treaty bodies and special procedures of the HRC and of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We positively assess the recent visit to Russia of the High Commissioner, Mrs. Navi Pillai, during which she met with President Medvedev and many leading ministries and administrations and held discussions, and this has further strengthened our cooperation. The Russian Federation is ready to continue cooperating positively with all states in the interests of strengthening human rights in general. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, for his statement. It is now my honor to invite
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He did mention, talked about the modernization of particular countries, of development of multilateral institutions, he says, elimination of double standards, promoting common human rights values. And he did also mention, talked about the problem in Libya. Here's what he said. He said the use of force is unacceptable and Russia condemns the violence and calls for cessation of that violence. Well, we do have more on our coverage of what's happening in Libya as tens of thousands of people are fleeing Libya. Well, the International Red Cross has declared a humanitarian emergency on the country's border.